The sun was low over the dusty spaceport, casting long orange shadows across rows of rusted metal and forgotten machines. The smell of oil and smoke filled the air, and the sound of voices rose from the crowd gathered in the scrapyard. Ethan Cole stood near the back, his hands in the pockets of his worn jacket. He was not here for fun. He was here because he needed something cheap he could repair and sell. Life had not been kind to him lately. His workshop was almost empty, and his debts were growing every day. If he could find just one valuable thing in this auction, it might keep him afloat for another month. The auctioneer, a tall man with a voice like broken metal, shouted over the noise. Next item, one sealed. Mining container from the asteroid belt, found in the wreckage of an old mining station. Contents unknown, condition well. You can see it yourself. 2 workers rolled it forward on a flat cart. The container was huge, about the size of a small cabin. Its metal sides were dented and scratched. But strangely, it gave off a faint hum. Ethan tilted his head. Was that a vibration? It was hard to tell over the sound of the crowd. Dangerous junk, someone muttered beside him, could be leaking radiation, or worse. Stay away from it, the auctioneer laughed. No guarantees, folks. Could be empty, could be full of rocks, could be something valuable. Who wants to take a chance? Ethan's eyes stayed on the container. He didn't know why, but something about it felt alive. It was a foolish thought, but it wouldn't leave his mind. The bidding started low. Most people didn't care. Only a few raised their hands, and even they quickly lost interest. The price was still small when Ethan's hand went up. He hadn't planned to bid, but before he knew it, the auctioneer's hammer came down. Sold. To the gentleman in the back. The crowd gave him a mix of curious and pitying looks. One man shook his head. Hope you didn't waste your money, pal. Ethan signed the papers, paid the credits, and watched as the container was rolled toward the back of the yard for him. To collect, up close, he could see strange markings on the metal faint. Almost worn away, they looked like they might have been writing once, but not in any language he knew. When he touched the surface, a strange thing happened. The humming grew louder, and for a split second, he felt something warm under his fingertips. Like the container was breathing, he quickly pulled his hand back, his heart beating faster. By the time he arranged for a small cargo hauler to take it home, the sky had grown dark, the air was cooler, and the scrapyard was almost empty. The workers loaded the container onto the hauler without a word, as if they were glad to see it go. At his workshop, Ethan parked the hauler and left the container in the middle of the floor. He turned on the lights, grabbed his tools, and walked around it slowly. The locks were old but sturdy. He tried cutting one with a plasma saw, but the blade sparked and slid off. It was like trying to cut through solid stone. Frustrated, he stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead. That's when he heard it. A faint sound, almost too soft to notice, like a tap, tap, tap from inside. He froze, listening. His mind raced. Was it a broken piece of machinery rattling around, or something else? Hello, he said without thinking. No answer, just silence. Then, after a moment, another sound, not tapping this time, but a voice. It was quiet, and the words were in a language he didn't know. Still, there was no mistaking it. Someone was inside. Ethan's chest tightened. How could that be possible? This thing had been sealed for decades. The auctioneer had said it came from a wreck. Could it really be a person, or maybe an alien? The voice came again, softer now, like a whisper, and then something that made his skin crawl. It said, his name, Ethan. He stumbled back, his tool clattering to the floor. How could whoever was inside know his name? The container's surface pulsed with a faint glow, just for a second, before going dark again. The humming had grown stronger, filling the workshop like a second heartbeat. Ethan stood there, breathing hard, his mind full of questions and fear. He should call someone, the authorities, the scrapyard, anyone, but he couldn't move. The voice whispered his name again, this time more urgent. and somewhere deep inside the sealed metal walls, something shifted. Hook for next part. That night, Ethan would discover that opening the container would change his life forever. Asterisk the next morning, the workshop was quiet, except for the low hum. Coming from the mining container, Ethan had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that faint voice whisper his name. He told himself it was just his imagination. Maybe a trick of the mind after a long day, but deep inside, he knew it was real. He walked around the container slowly, running his fingers over its cold surface. The strange markings seemed to shift in the light, as if they were alive. He tried again with his tools, a heavy cutting torch, then a diamond drill, but nothing worked. The metal stayed perfect. Not even a scratch. Frustrated, he kicked aside. The humming instantly grew louder, and for a moment, it felt like the air in the room changed. It was warmer, heavier, as if something inside had noticed him. "Who are you?" he muttered under his breath. A soft thud answered from within, then a sound like chains rattling. Ethan froze. The tapping from last night started again, slower this time. Like whoever or whatever was inside was tired. He went to his workbench and pulled out his translator device. It wasn't the best model, but it could pick up and decode over 100 languages. He pressed it against the container, waiting. The tapping stopped, and then the voice returned. The words were broken, mixed with static, but he could understand just enough. "Help. Trapped. Please." His breath caught. This was no machine, no piece of old mining equipment. There was a living being in there, and they were asking him for help. Before he could respond, the door to the workshop opened, and his neighbor, an older mechanic named Bragg, stepped inside. Bragg was gruff and always smelled of fuel. He glanced at the container and frowned. "You bought that thing from the yard?" Bragg asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, why?" Bragg's eyes narrowed. "You're a fool. That's a deep space mining vault. They used them during the old wars to transport dangerous things, sometimes stolen tech, sometimes prisoners. You have no idea what's inside." Ethan's grip on his wrench tightened. "I think it's someone, and I think they're alive." Bragg stepped back, shaking his head. "If that's true, you need to take it far from here. There are people, bad people, who'd kill to get that back." Ethan looked at the container. The thought of walking away from it made his chest tighten. Whoever was inside had survived for decades. How could he abandon them now? When Bragg left, Ethan crouched beside the container again, pressing his ear to the cool metal. "I'll get you out, I promise," he whispered, as if in response. The humming shifted, growing softer, almost like a sigh of relief. He spent the rest of the day trying everything, cutting, prying, even hacking into the old lock mechanism, but the controls were unlike anything he had seen. The wires glowed faintly with a blue light, and when he touched them, a jolt shot up his arm. By late evening, he was exhausted. He sat on the floor, leaning against the container. The glow from the markings cast faint patterns on the walls. He stared at them, wondering if they were some kind of code. Then, without warning, a sharp click echoed inside. He jumped to his feet. The container's top panel shifted slightly, leaving a thin gap. Ethan's heart pounded. He grabbed a crowbar and wedged it into the gap, straining with all his strength. The metal creaked but didn't give way. From inside, the voice spoke again, clearer now, though still accented. "Please, hurry." Ethan stepped back, chest heaving. His mind raced. If he opened it now, he didn't know what might come out. But if he didn't, whoever was in there might not survive. He decided to try again in the morning, but as he turned to leave, he noticed something strange. The workshop door was open, and muddy footprints led inside. Ethan spun around, scanning the shadows. Someone had been here, watching him. He rushed to the container, pressing his hands against it protectively. Whoever those footprints belonged to, they might know exactly what or who was inside, and they might be coming back for it. That night, Ethan locked the workshop tight, but as he lay in bed, The humming from the container seemed louder than ever, and each time the wind blew, he swore he heard distant footsteps in the yard. Hook for next part. At dawn, the container would no longer be closed, as he had left it. Something, or someone, would have shifted it open, just enough to see inside. Ethan woke to the sound of metal shifting. It was faint but sharp, like something heavy scraping against steel. His eyes snapped open. The morning light was just starting to slip through the blinds. He grabbed his jacket and rushed to the workshop. The door lock was still in place, but when he pushed the door open, he stopped dead. The container was no longer sealed as it had been. One of the heavy panels had slid halfway open, leaving a narrow gap. Cold air seeped out, mixed with a strange scent, like flowers and burnt metal. Ethan's heart pounded. He stepped closer, crowbar in hand. The gap was too small to see much, but as he leaned in, he caught movement inside. Something shifted in the shadows, slow and weak. "Hello?" he whispered. From within, a soft voice answered. It was clearer now, trembling but real. "Help, please." He gripped the edge of the panel and pulled with all his strength. The metal resisted at first, then groaned and gave way. The panel slid aside, and a wave of cold air rushed over him, making his skin prickle. Inside the container was not what he expected. It wasn't a storage box. It was more like a small room. The walls were lined with strange glowing lines, and in the center, chained to the floor, was a figure. It was a young alien woman. She had deep violet skin that seemed to shimmer faintly under the light. Her hair was long and emerald green, flowing over her shoulders like silk. Around her neck was a collar made of black metal with glowing red symbols. Her wrists and ankles were bound by the same strange metal. She blinked at him, her eyes large and luminous, like pools of liquid silver. There was fear in them, but also something else. Hope. Ethan stepped forward slowly. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." She tried to speak, but her voice was hoarse. He saw a small cup in the corner, long, empty. He hurried to his workbench, grabbed a flask of water, and held it out to her. She hesitated, then drank greedily, water running down her chin. When she finished, she looked at him again, studying his face as if trying to understand him. Then she spoke in broken English. "You are human." "Yes," Ethan said. "And you? Who are you?" She lowered her gaze. Lisa. The name was soft, almost musical, but before he could ask more, she tensed. Her ears, small and pointed, twitched toward the workshop door. Ethan followed her gaze. At first, he heard nothing. Then, faint but growing louder, came the sound of footsteps outside, slow and heavy. Her chains rattled as she pulled against them, panic flashing in her eyes. "They come," she whispered, "for me." "And you?" Ethan's grip tightened on the crowbar. "Who?" She shook her head. "Hunters. Slavers. Not stop until take me." A shadow passed across the workshop window. Someone was outside, watching Ethan move to the door, heart pounding. He could just make out figures moving between the piles of scrap in the yard, armored and armed. The glint of metal weapons caught the light. He turned back to Lysera. "I'm not leaving you here." She stared at him, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Then she gave a small nod. "Key. Collar. In control unit. Red box." She glanced toward a panel in the corner of her container room. Ethan crossed the space and yanked the red box from the wall. It was heavy, with a single glowing button. He didn't know if pressing it would free her or kill her, but there was no time to think. Outside, the footsteps were at the door. A voice called out, low and cold. "We know you have her. Human, open the door, and you won't die." Ethan hit the button. The collar around Lysera's neck flickered, then hissed. The red light faded to black. The chains clicked open and fell to the floor. She stumbled forward, weak. Ethan caught her, and for the first time, he realized just how light she was. Her hands clutched his arm, trembling. The workshop door shook as someone tried to break it. Down, Ethan looked at Lysera. "Can you run?" She nodded weakly. With you? Yes. The door cracked under the force of a heavy blow. Wood splintered, metal bent. Ethan grabbed a welding torch from the table. The blue flame roared to life. Lysera stood close behind him, her silver eyes fixed on the door. When the door burst open, Ethan was ready. Hook for next part. The first intruder would regret stepping inside, because Ethan wasn't about to give up the alien girl he had just freed. Asterisk. The door burst open with a deafening crash, splinters of wood and twisted metal flying across the floor. The cold morning air rushed in, carrying the smell of ozone and dust. The first man through was massive, dressed in black armor with a visor that hid his face. In his hands was a sleek alien rifle, glowing with blue light. He froze for just a heartbeat when he saw Ethan standing there, holding the welding torch. Like a weapon, Ethan didn't give him time to recover. He lunged forward, swinging the torch. The bright flame hissed against the man's armor. Sparks flying, the hunter roared and stumbled back. Behind him, more figures pushed inside, their footsteps heavy, their weapons raised. Their armor was mismatched but deadly looking, scavenged from dozens of battles. Each one had a small red symbol painted on their shoulder, a mark Ethan had never seen before. Lysera's breathing quickened. She whispered in his ear, "Blood-marked clan." The way she said it made his stomach tighten. The lead hunter raised his rifle. "Step away from her, human." His voice was deep, filtered through the helmet's speaker. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Ethan tightened his grip on the torch. "She's not going anywhere with you." The hunter laughed. But there was no humor in it. "You think you can stop us? She belongs to us, property of the clan. We paid for her. She is ours to keep or sell." Lysera stepped from behind Ethan, her silver eyes blazing. "I am not yours," she said, her voice shaking but fierce. The hunter tilted his head. "You were born ours the moment we took your world." Ethan's blood boiled. He had no idea what history lay between them, but he knew one thing. No one should talk about another person like they were a piece of cargo. One of the hunters moved to the side, trying to flank them. Ethan spotted the motion. He reached for a metal pipe lying on the workbench and hurled it with all his strength. The pipe slammed into the man's helmet, sending him staggering into a pile of scrap. "Get them," the leader barked. The workshop exploded into chaos. Ethan swung the torch again, keeping the hunters at bay. Lysera grabbed a wrench from the bench and hurled it at another attacker. Her movements were clumsy from exhaustion, but her aim was true. The wrench smashed into the man's chest plate, knocking the wind out of him. One of the hunters grabbed Ethan's arm, trying to wrestle the torch from him. Ethan kicked him hard in the knee, sending him crashing into the side of the container. Outside, more footsteps echoed. The rest of the clan was coming. Ethan knew they couldn't hold this position. "Back door," he shouted to Lysera. She nodded, darting toward the storage room. Ethan swung the torch one last time, forcing the nearest hunter to jump back, then ran after her. They burst out the rear door into the alley behind the workshop. The air was cold and sharp. The ground was littered with rusted tools and broken parts. Behind them, the hunters shouted, boots pounding on the floor. Ethan grabbed Lysera's hand and pulled her toward the old cargo hauler parked in the shadows. "Get in," he ordered. She climbed into the passenger seat as he jumped behind the controls. The hauler's engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Ethan slammed the throttle forward. The heavy vehicle lurched ahead, wheels grinding against the gravel. From the workshop door, the hunters opened fire. Blue energy bolts lit up the alley. Ethan swerved hard, a bolt grazing the hauler's side, leaving a smoking burn. Lysera turned in her seat, eyes locked on the hunters. She raised her hand, and for a brief moment, her skin seemed to glow. A pulse of silver light shot from her palm, striking the ground in front of the attackers. The blast sent debris flying, forcing them to dive for cover. Ethan glanced at her, stunned. What was that? Her gaze stayed on the road ahead. "A warning," she said softly. "I can do more." but it will cost me. The hauler sped out of the yard, weaving between rusted starship hulls and abandoned machinery. Behind them, the hunters scrambled into their own vehicles, engines growling to life. They will follow, Lysera warned. They will not stop. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we'll make them regret it. As they roared toward the edge of the scrapyard, a shadow fell over them. Ethan looked up and saw a dark shape moving in the sky, a small gunship, its engines glowing. Lysera's hand gripped his arm. That is their leader. If they catch us now, we will never escape. Ethan glanced at the road ahead. The open desert stretched out beyond the last row of scrap. He pressed the throttle harder, the hauler's engine screaming. The gunship dropped lower, its cannons swiveling toward them. Hook for next part. If Ethan didn't think fast, the next shot from above would end both their lives and Lysera's freedom forever. The gunship's cannons glowed brighter, aiming straight for the cargo hauler. Ethan swerved hard, the vehicle bouncing over uneven ground. A blast hit the dirt just behind them, sending up a cloud of smoke and dust. Lysera's hands tightened on the edge of her seat. Faster, she urged. Her silver eyes flicked from the gunship to Ethan's determined face. The old hauler groaned as Ethan pushed it to its limits. The scrapyard finally fell away behind them, replaced by the open stretch of desert. The sun blazed overhead, heat waves shimmering across the sand. Another blast hit just ahead, spraying sand into the windshield. Ethan cursed under his breath. We can't outrun them like this. Lysera glanced at him, her voice calm but urgent. Then we must hide. Ethan scanned the horizon. In the distance, jagged cliffs rose from the sand, forming a canyon that twisted out of sight. Hold on, he said, yanking the controls. The hauler veered toward the cliffs, the gunship banking sharply to follow. They roared into the canyon, narrow walls closing in around them. The gunship tried to follow, but its wide frame scraped the rock, forcing it to pull up higher. For now, they had cover. When the sound of the engines faded, Ethan slowed the hauler and pulled into a shadowy alcove beneath an overhang. He turned to Lysera. All right, we need to talk. Who are they, and why are they after you? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Her gaze was on her hands, fingers tracing the faint red marks left by the collar. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet. I am Lysera Vale, Princess of the Kyrian Dominion. Ethan blinked. Princess? She nodded slowly. My people ruled the mining worlds in the Outer Rim. We had ships, armies, and resources, but we were betrayed. Her eyes darkened as she continued. The Bloodmark clan came under the cover of peace. They wanted our minds, our technology. They took our leaders hostage. They killed my parents before my eyes. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. They chained me, put the collar on me, and sealed me inside that vault to be sold to the highest bidder. Ethan leaned back, letting her words sink in. He had suspected she was important, but a princess. That was another level entirely. How long were you in there? She shook her head. Time blurred. I was in stasis most of the time, only waking when they moved the container. The last time I woke to your voice. Ethan looked away, thinking about the day at the auction. He had bought the container for a handful of credits, but inside was someone who had once ruled worlds. Lysera studied his face. You could have left me there. Many would have. Ethan met her gaze. I'm not many. A small smile touched her lips, but it faded quickly. The collar you broke. It was tied to their network. They know it is gone. They will chase us harder now. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Then we find somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach. She hesitated, then reached for the small pouch hanging from her belt. It looked old and worn. She opened it and pulled out a tiny crystal shard, glowing faintly. This is why they want me, she said, holding it out. This is a shard of the Heartstone, the core of my people's power. It can power ships, weapons, even cities. They will not stop until they have it. Ethan stared at the shard. Then why keep it? Why not destroy it? She closed her hand around it. Because it is the last piece of my world. Destroying it would erase us completely, and it is my duty to protect it. Silence filled the canyon for a moment. Only the wind whispering through the rocks. Finally, Ethan stood. All right, Princess Lycera, if this shard is so important, then we need a plan to keep it, and you safe. She tilted her head. Why do you help me, Ethan Cole? This is not your fight. He gave a half smile. It is now. A faint sound reached them, the distant whine of engines. Lycera's expression hardened. They are close. Ethan moved back to the hauler. Then we move now, before they trap us here. As they pulled out of the alcove and headed deeper into the canyon, Lycera glanced at him again. If you stay with me, you will have no peace. He looked ahead at the twisting path. Peace is overrated. Far above. A shadow passed over the cliffs. The gunship had found them again. Hook for next part. This time, the hunters wouldn't just try to take her alive. They would bring enough firepower to destroy everything around her. And Ethan would have to risk his life to stop them. Asterisk, the canyon walls shook as the gunship's engines roared overhead. Dust rained down from the cliffs, and the sharp smell of heated metal filled the air. Ethan gripped the hauler's controls. Tighter, weaving through the narrow path. They're blocking the exit ahead, Lycera said, her voice steady but tense. She leaned forward, scanning the cliffs like a hawk. We cannot go straight. We must go where they least expect. Ethan glanced at her. You know a way out. She nodded once. There is a smuggler's tunnel halfway through the canyon, but it is narrow, and your hauler is large. Ethan smirked. Guess we'll find out if it fits. The sound of heavy engines grew louder from both directions. The Bloodmark clan had split their forces, trapping them between the gunship and ground vehicles. As they rounded a bend, Ethan spotted them for armored speeders blocking the canyon floor. Each carried 2 hunters armed with energy rifles. The leader raised a hand, and the others aimed at the hauler. Ethan slammed the brakes, the hauler skidding on the gravel. Lycera's hand shot out, grabbing the dashboard. What now? She asked. He grinned. We make some noise. Before she could reply, he hit the throttle. The hauler roared forward, the heavy frame barreling straight toward the blockade. The hunters opened fire, blue bolts striking the armor and shattering glass. Ethan swerved at the last second, clipping the nearest speeder. It spun out of control, smashing into the canyon wall. The others scrambled to move, but the hauler's massive front plowed through, sending one hunter flying. The gunship swooped lower behind them, its cannons charging. Lycera turned in her seat, her silver eyes glowing faintly. She raised both hands, and a wave of shimmering light burst outward. The blast struck the canyon wall, sending chunks of rock crashing down in the gunship's path, forcing it to pull up sharply. Not bad, Ethan said with a quick glance. Lycera's breathing was heavy. It takes my strength. I cannot do that again soon. They sped deeper into the canyon, the sound of engines still behind them. Ethan spotted a narrow opening in the rock to the right, half hidden by shadows. That it? He asked. Yes, Lycera said. But it is small, too small for them to follow in their speeders. Ethan swung the hauler toward the gap. The vehicle scraped both sides of the opening, metal screaming against stone. Sparks flew, but they forced their way through. The tunnel beyond was dark, lit only by the faint glow of Lycera's crystal shard. The walls were close enough to touch, and the air smelled of damp earth and oil. They followed the twisting path for several minutes, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. Finally, they emerged into a hidden basin, an old smuggler's hideout carved into the rock. Rusting starship parts lay scattered across the ground, and in the center was a battered but intact shuttle. Ethan pulled the hauler to a stop. Think it can fly? Lycera studied it. If the engines still work. Yes, but we must be quick. They will find the tunnel soon. They ran to the shuttle. Ethan pried open the access hatch and climbed inside. Dust coated the controls, but the interior was intact. He hit the power switch, and the engines coughed to life. Still works, he said with a grin. Lysera moved to the co-pilot's seat, her fingers brushing over alien controls. I can fly this, but you must keep them from boarding before we lift off. Ethan grabbed a pulse rifle from the shuttle's wall mount and moved to the open hatch. Outside, the sound of engines was returning. The hunters had found the tunnel. The first speeder burst through the gap. Ethan opened fire. Blue energy bolts striking the vehicle's front. It skidded and flipped, the rider's throne clear. More followed, the air filled with the hiss of energy blasts. Ethan ducked behind a crate, returning fire in short bursts. Lysera's voice came from inside. Engines ready, we must go now. Ethan sprinted back up the ramp as the nearest hunter lunged forward. Grabbing his leg, the man's visor reflected the pale light, and Ethan drove his boot into it, breaking free. The shuttle's ramp closed, sealing them inside. Lysera pulled the controls. The ship rumbled, rising slowly from the basin floor. Below, the hunters fired wildly, bolts striking the shuttle's armor, but it kept climbing, breaking free of the canyon walls and into the open sky. Ethan dropped into the seat beside her, chest heaving. We made it. Lysera didn't smile. Her gaze was fixed on the radar, where a larger blip was moving fast toward them. It is not over, she said quietly. That is their warship. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then let's not let them catch us. The shuttle turned sharply, engines roaring as they shot toward the horizon, the warship's shadow growing larger behind them. Hook for next part. The only way to escape now would be to fly straight into a forbidden zone, a place even the hunters feared to follow, but one that might kill them both. The shuttle shook violently as it sped through the upper atmosphere. The warship's cannons fired from behind, each blast rattling the hull. Ethan gripped the armrest, watching the red warning lights flicker across the dashboard. They are closing fast, Lysera said, her voice steady, but her eyes tense. Her hands moved over the alien controls with practiced precision. We must enter the black veil. Ethan frowned. The what? She glanced at him. A dead zone in space, full of magnetic storms, drifting rock, and pockets of dark energy. No one who enters without a guide returns. Ethan smirked faintly. Lucky for me, I have a guide. Lysera didn't return the smile. It will be dangerous even for me. The storms can tear a ship apart in seconds. Another blast rocked the shuttle, sending sparks from the ceiling. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then it's either that, or let them catch us. Lysera nodded. Once, turning the shuttle sharply, toward a massive black cloud swirling in space ahead. It was like a storm frozen in the void. Lightning flashed deep inside, illuminating jagged asteroid fragments drifting in the darkness. The warship slowed as they approached, keeping its distance. Lysera's voice dropped. They fear the veil. They will wait for us to die inside. Then they will collect what is left. Then we don't die. Ethan said, leaning forward. We prove them wrong. They plunged into the swirling darkness. The shuttle's hull groaned under the strain. Magnetic waves pulled at the controls, and rocks spun past dangerously close. Lysera's eyes glowed faintly, her hands guiding the ship with precision. Ethan could feel the static in the air, making his skin prickle. How are you doing that? He asked. She didn't look away from the controls. My people were born in the storms. I can feel the currents. I know where they shift. The deeper they went, the wilder the lightning became. One bolt struck close enough to blind Ethan for a second. Tell me you know the way out, he muttered. Lysera's voice was calm. Yes, but I cannot take us there without your help. What can I do? She handed him a control lever on the right side. When I say now, pull this as hard as you can. It will release the energy we store from the storm. It will push us out. They flew deeper, the turbulence shaking every bolt and panel of the ship. Then Lysera shouted, now. Ethan yanked the lever. The shuttle's core roared to life. Silver energy bursting from the rear. The ship shot forward like an arrow, weaving through the last of the asteroids and breaking free into open space. The black veil shrank behind them. The warship was still there, but now far smaller, and not chasing. They won't follow, Lysera said softly. They believe we are cursed now. Ethan let out a long breath. Good, let's keep it that way. The shuttle drifted for a while, the stars stretching endlessly. Ahead, in the quiet, Lysera reached into her pouch and pulled out the crystal shard. She held it between them, its glow soft and steady. This belongs to my people, she said, but today, I entrust it to you. Ethan shook his head. That's too important. I can't. You already carry it. She interrupted gently. Not in your hands, but in what you have done. You gave me my freedom. You risked your life when you could have walked away. Ethan looked at her, the seriousness in her silver eyes, leaving no room for argument. So, what now? She hesitated, then said, in my culture, when someone saves a royal life, they become bound to them, not as a servant, not as a slave, but as something greater. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Greater how? Lysera's lips curved into a faint smile. A protector, a partner, a bond for life. He leaned back in his seat. Sounds like a lot of responsibility. It is, she said simply, but you have already accepted it, even if you did not know. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the glow of the shard. Between them, finally, Ethan reached out, closing her fingers over it. All right, princess, we're in this together. She met his gaze, her smile widening just a little. Then you are no longer just Ethan Cole. Mechanic, you are Ethan Cole, protector of the Kyrian air. The title sounded strange, but in that moment, he didn't mind it. Outside the viewport, a distant cluster of lights appeared, a hidden outpost. That is where we will be safe for now, Lysera said, but the fight is not over. The Bloodmark clan will come again. They always do. Ethan glanced at her, then let them come. They'll have to go through me first. Lysera's silver eyes held his for a moment longer, then she looked forward, guiding the shuttle toward the outpost. The stars seemed brighter now, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he was heading toward something worth fighting for. Final closing line. He had bought a rusted old container for scrap, but inside he had found something more valuable than anything in the galaxy, a new purpose, and a bond that nothing could break.